What if I told you that Viking warriors were cultivating vegetables in their harsh Nordic settlements that could solve every problem plaguing modern agriculture today? These fearless Norse explorers grew 17 remarkable lost crops that delivered superior nutrition, required zero pesticides, and thrived in conditions that would kill today's pampered vegetables. Yet, we've abandoned nearly every single one for inferior modern varieties that need constant babying. Today, we're rediscovering these ancient superfoods that prove Vikings weren't just master warriors. They were agricultural geniuses whose forgotten wisdom could revolutionize how we grow food. Seabbeet. Let's start with a vegetable so powerful that it's actually the ancestor of 3 different crops we buy separately at grocery stores today. Seabbeet, Beta vulgaris maritima, was the original superfood that Vikings harvested from coastal cliffs and rocky shores throughout Scandinavia. This isn't just another leafy green. This single plant is the genetic foundation for modern beets, spinach, and Swiss chard. Archaeological evidence from coastal Viking settlements shows they deliberately cultivated seabbeet in their gardens after discovering it growing wild along fjords and shorelines. What made this plant absolutely revolutionary was its incredible adaptability. While modern vegetables need perfect soil conditions, seabbeet thrives in salty, sandy soil that would kill most garden plants. Vikings could grow nutritious greens right next to the ocean where nothing else would survive. The leaves are more nutritious than modern spinach, packed with minerals absorbed from sea spray and coastal soil. Vikings ate them raw in early spring, when vitamin deficiency was killing people across Europe, or cooked them into hearty stews that sustained families through brutal winters. The roots, when left to grow for 2 years, developed the sweet, earthy flavor we associate with modern beets, but with far superior nutrition density. Here's what's fascinating. We took this one incredible plant and bred it into 3 separate, weaker varieties that each need different growing conditions. Meanwhile, the original seabbeet still grows wild along European coasts, offering superior nutrition and requiring zero care from gardeners. It's like having a Swiss Army knife and trading it for 3 separate tools that each only do one job poorly. Wild leek. Ramps. Next comes a plant that modern foragers pay premium prices for at farmers markets, completely unaware that Vikings were cultivating it in their gardens over 1,000 years ago. Wild leek, Allium tricoccum, known today as ramps, was so valuable to Norse settlements that they established entire garden plots dedicated to this pungent bulb. Recent archaeological analysis of soil samples from Greenland Viking settlements has revealed allium pollen and bulb fragments, proving that Vikings weren't just harvesting wild ramps, they were actively cultivating them. This makes perfect sense when you understand that ramps provide intense onion garlic flavor that could transform bland, preserved foods into something actually edible. What made ramps absolutely essential for Viking communities was their timing. These plants emerge in early spring, exactly when stored onions and garlic from the previous year were running out or had spoiled. Vikings could harvest fresh, potent flavoring just when their food was becoming monotonous and nutritionally deficient. The bulbs could be pickled or dried for later use, providing year-round access to this concentrated flavor. Modern restaurants charge premium prices for ramps during their brief spring season, treating them like exotic delicacies. Meanwhile, Vikings had figured out how to cultivate reliable supplies of this gourmet ingredient in their own gardens. The plants naturalize easily, spreading through underground bulbs to create permanent colonies that produce food for generations without replanting. We've turned this practical Viking staple into an expensive seasonal luxury when it could be growing in backyards across America, providing free gourmet flavoring every spring. Brooklime. Now let's discuss a plant that proves Vikings understood hydroponic gardening centuries before modern agriculture discovered it. Brooklime, Veronica beckabunga, was cultivated in the shallow streams and wet areas around Viking settlements, essentially creating the world's first aquaculture vegetable systems. This succulent plant, from the speedwell family, grows naturally in clean, flowing water, and Vikings recognized its value as a reliable source of fresh greens that could be harvested throughout the growing season. Archaeological evidence from water management systems at Viking settlements shows they deliberately channeled streams through their communities, creating perfect growing conditions for brooklime and other water-loving plants. The thick, fleshy leaves have a sharp watercress-like flavor and are loaded with vitamin C and minerals absorbed directly from flowing water. Vikings consumed brooklime raw as a scurvy preventative, or added it to soups and stews for both nutrition and flavor. What made this plant particularly particularly valuable was its ability to grow in conditions where soil-based vegetables couldn't survive. Medieval physicians recognized Brooklime as a blood purifier and prescribed it for skin conditions, understanding that its high mineral content provided medicinal benefits beyond basic nutrition. The plant essentially functioned as a natural water filter, concentrating nutrients from streams while providing Vikings with fresh vegetables, even during harsh weather when garden plants failed. Modern hydroponic systems attempt to replicate what Vikings achieved naturally with Brooklime, growing nutrient-dense vegetables in water-based systems. We've invested millions in developing technology to do what Norse settlers accomplished with simple stream management and plant selection. Enjoying raiding the past with us? Then consider using YouTube's new feature and hype this video. It really helps a small channel like mine get more views and allows me to create more content. To hype the video on your mobile device, swipe left on the comment preview carousel until the option to hype the video surfaces, or tap, and the carousel will change to show the option to hype. Your support helps a ton. Now back to the lost Viking vegetables. Stinging nettle. Moving to a plant that modern gardeners spend fortunes trying to eliminate, completely unaware they're destroying one of the most nutritious vegetables on the planet. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, held such importance in Viking society that burial sites contain nettle seeds among precious grave goods, indicating this plant was deemed worthy of the afterlife journey. The renowned Augsburg ship burial included nettle seeds alongside other treasured items, revealing that nettles transcended mere sustenance to become culturally significant. Once you neutralize the sting through cooking or drying, nettles transform into nutritional powerhouses that surpass most modern vegetables in mineral content. Vikings treated nettles as we might use comprehensive vitamin supplements. The leaves deliver exceptional iron levels, calcium content that rivals dairy products, and protein concentrations that exceed most leafy greens. They represent complete nutritional packages that flourish everywhere without human intervention. Norse communities harvested tender nettle tips during early spring when nutritional deficiencies were widespread across medieval Europe. What made nettles indispensable for Viking settlements was their unwavering dependability. These plants endure harsh winters that destroy other vegetables, then return robustly each spring with abundant fresh nutrition precisely when communities needed it most. Vikings could rely on nettles delivering essential vitamins year after year without requiring any gardening effort. Today's consumers invest heavily in nutritional supplements while this complete superfood proliferates in their neighborhoods. We've waged war against nettles due to their protective sting, essentially rejecting nature's most comprehensive vitamin source because it demands respectful handling during harvest. Angelica. Here comes a plant that demonstrates how Vikings conquered scurvy long before maritime nations understood citrus fruits could prevent this deadly disease. Angelica archangelica, wasn't simply another garden herb. It served as their nutritional insurance against vitamin deficiency that devastated sailors during extended voyages. Archaeological excavations at Norse settlements like Hythabu reveal extensive angelica seed deposits and pollen evidence, proving Vikings dedicated substantial garden space to this impressive plant with its characteristic umbrella-shaped flower heads. Medieval Icelandic legal codes specifically prohibited stealing angelica from neighbors' gardens, demonstrating exactly how precious this plant was within Norse communities. Vikings utilized every portion of angelica strategically. The tender stems and roots functioned as vegetables, while seeds and leaves provided sweet, anise-flavored seasoning. The complete plant served medicinal purposes that modern science now understands prevented scurvy through high vitamin C content. Contemporary Icelanders continue brewing angelica seed tea and using leaves to season fish, maintaining traditions spanning over 10 centuries. This plant exhibits remarkable cold resistance and flourished in Norse gardens, where other herbs would succumb to freezing temperatures. As international trade introduced exotic spices to Europe, angelica cultivation gradually diminished. Today, it persists mainly in wild populations or specialized heritage gardens, representing living proof of Viking nutritional wisdom that could naturally prevent vitamin deficiency diseases. Ground elder. Let's examine a plant that contemporary agriculture considers a dangerous invader, while Vikings deliberately cultivated it as dependable nutrition. Ground elder, Egopodium podagraria, appears on modern pest control lists requiring immediate elimination, yet archaeological evidence from Viking settlements tells an entirely different story. This hardy perennial with distinctive compound leaves was intentionally grown in medieval Bergen gardens. Known as bishop's weed or goutweed, it has served as edible greens for over a millennium. Ground elder essentially represents nature's offer of free nutrition, which modern gardeners reject due to stubborn preconceptions. Vikings consumed tender young leaves fresh or prepared them like spinach for cooked dishes. This plant grows vigorously, withstands frost damage, and provides abundant vitamins A and C. Medieval healers valued ground elder for treating gout symptoms, explaining its Latin designation podagraria. Norse communities recognized its importance as reliable perennial greens that could sustain families when other vegetables became unavailable. The plant demands no cultivation beyond managing its natural spreading tendency, making it ideal for communities requiring food security without intensive gardening labor. Contemporary agriculture wages chemical warfare against ground elder using herbicides, labeling this nutritious plant problematic, while consumers pay premium prices for organic spinach and kale. Ground elder represents the ultimate survivor. Despite our attempts at eradication, it persistently returns, offering free nutrition while we remain too proud to accept nature's gift. Wild celery. Here's where Viking agriculture becomes fascinating. They cultivated original wild celery, Apium graveolens, and archaeological findings from Danish settlements like Hythabu and Birka confirm this cultivation occurred over 10 centuries ago. This wasn't the watery, flavorless celery stalks familiar today. This was celery with substantial nutrition and intense flavor. This fragrant plant, from the carrot family, originates in European wetlands, and Vikings primarily valued it for nutrient-dense seeds and leaves rather than stalks. The seeds provided powerful seasoning for broths and stews, delivering concentrated flavor that modern artificial seasonings attempt to duplicate but never match. Leaves and root portions enhanced stews as both flavoring agents and medicinal ingredients. This ancient variety demonstrated remarkable cold tolerance and drought resistance, thriving in Nordic wetlands where contemporary vegetables would fail completely. Vikings possessed homegrown seasoning that could withstand any environmental challenges nature presented. Our mistake was replacing this resilient survivor with modern celery that consists mainly of water and requires controlled greenhouse conditions for successful growth. Traditional varieties, including leaf celery and celeriac, lost popularity as blanched stalk celery gained commercial favor. Today, most cooks remain unaware these original varieties exist outside specialty gardens. It's comparable to replacing a robust working dog with a delicate show breed, technically the same species but vastly different capabilities. Chicory, Sicorium intybus, might appear as ordinary roadside vegetation with its pale blue flowers, yet charred chicory seeds discovered at Norse archaeological sites reveal a completely different narrative. This bitter-flavored plant, from the daisy family, was intentionally cultivated by Vikings who understood something modern nutrition has forgotten. Bitter compounds actually enhance health. Young leaves served as bitter salad greens or pot herbs, supplying crucial nutrients during scarce winter and early spring months. Vikings also roasted roots to create coffee-like beverages, a practice that remained common throughout Europe for centuries. This plant fulfilled dual roles as both nutrition and medicine, supporting digestive health in communities that recognized connections between bitter foods and wellness. Contemporary chemical analysis confirms what Vikings understood intuitively. Chicory contains abundant inulin fiber and antioxidants that health professionals now classify as superfoods. But here's the remarkable aspect. Chicory flourishes in poor soil conditions and tolerates heat and drought better than most vegetables. It's essentially the ultimate survivor of the plant kingdom, thriving in conditions that would eliminate pampered modern crops. We abandoned this climate-resilient superfood because its flavor was too complex for modern preferences favoring bland vegetables. Chicory lost ground to milder leafy greens and commercial coffee, becoming relegated to ignored roadside weeds. Garden orach, Atriplex hortensis, demonstrates that Vikings maintained more diverse and nutritious diets than most contemporary families. Archaeological evidence from 10th and 11th century Scandinavian sites shows they cultivated this leafy green in varieties that have completely disappeared from modern gardens. This sturdy plant from the goosefoot family originated in Eastern Europe but adapted excellently to Norwegian conditions, where Vikings appreciated its value for challenging growing situations. Orach essentially represents spinach's more interesting and resilient cousin, available in red, green, and purple varieties that would make contemporary salads Instagram-worthy. What made orach truly valuable for Viking communities was its rapid maturation and ability to provide early spring greens when vitamin-rich foods were desperately needed. Vikings could harvest fresh, colorful leaves, while other European populations were still consuming stored grains and preserved meats. This plant tolerates salty and arid soil, making it perfect for coastal settlements where other vegetables would struggle. Medieval gardeners specifically valued orach because it could produce nutrition from marginal conditions where other vegetables failed completely. By modern times, orach had disappeared from common use as spinach and kale gained dominance. In Scandinavia, it's now rarely found in gardens, despite being perfectly suited to northern climates. Sweet Sicily, Myrrhis odorata, was so remarkable in medieval Bergen that locals called it sweet fern or anise root. This anise-scented herb functioned as the Vikings' sugar substitute, providing natural sweetness centuries before refined sugar reached northern Europe. Every portion of this plant, from the parsley family, delivered gentle sweetness with distinctive licorice notes. Vikings used leaves and stems to sweeten soups and stews, employed seeds as flavoring agents, and utilized roots as sweet seasoning that made harsh winter meals more palatable. It was valued enough that monastery gardens specifically cultivated Sweet Sicily, and Norwegian confectioners created candy flavored with this exceptional plant. What made Sweet Sicily perfect for Viking settlements was its shade tolerance and ability to naturalize in woodland clearings. Many Norse communities were situated in forested areas where full sun crops wouldn't thrive, but Sweet Sicily flourished in partial shade conditions. This plant is rich in essential oils and nutrients, providing both flavoring and medicinal benefits in one convenient package. Archaeological evidence from western Norway shows Sweet Sicily was commonly grown in medieval gardens, valued both for its sweetening properties and its role in folk medicine. The plant could reduce dependence on precious honey stores while adding complex flavors to simple foods. With the advent of imported sugar and artificial flavorings, Sweet Sicily gradually disappeared from European gardens. It survived mainly in old monastery sites and traditional herb gardens, but most modern cooks have never experienced its unique flavor profile. Horseradish, Armoracia rusticana, functioned as the Viking equivalent of a concentrated spice arsenal. Medieval documentation and archaeological evidence show it was treasured both as food and medicine, providing preservation properties that could extend stored meat's shelf life through extended winters. The intensely hot white root was grated as a condiment for stews and sauces, providing powerful flavor that could revive your taste buds and clear your respiratory system instantly. Vikings also consumed young leaves in salads, though few contemporary people realize horseradish leaves are perfectly edible. The root contains substantial vitamin C levels and antimicrobial compounds, essentially functioning as nature's antibiotic that happen to deliver concentrated heat. What made horseradish truly suitable for Viking communities was its exceptional durability. This plant survives in growing zones 2 through 9, propagates through root division, and once established, supplies a lifetime of preservative and medicine. Vikings could plant it once and provide generations with flavor enhancement and food preservation capabilities. Most contemporary gardeners purchase jarred horseradish rather than growing this virtually maintenance-free plant. It's comparable to buying bottled water when you have a perfectly functional well in your backyard. Vikings had discovered how to grow their own preservatives, flavor enhancers, and medicines all in one indestructible plant. Burdock, Arctium lapa, might be the most unfairly maligned plant in gardening history. Those sticky burrs that cling to your clothing and annoy hikers are actually protecting one of the most nutritious root vegetables Vikings ever cultivated. Historical documentation confirms that medieval gardens specifically grew burdock for its substantial edible roots. The Japanese still recognize what we've forgotten. Burdock root, which they call gobo, is a culinary treasure with an earthy, sophisticated flavor. It's packed with inulin and trace minerals that provide significant nutritional benefits. Vikings also consumed young leaf stalks and flowering shoots like asparagus, utilizing multiple parts of the plant. This biennial plant, with impressively large leaves, thrives on waste ground and poor soil, essentially converting marginal land into food production. It's the ultimate sustainable plant, improving soil structure while producing nutritious food, and accomplishing all of this without any assistance from gardeners. We declared war on burdock because of its clingy burrs, essentially prohibiting a nutritious food source because it was too persistent. Modern dating apps could learn something from burdock's attachment strategies, but meanwhile, we're missing out on a hearty, nutritious vegetable that requires no special care and improves the soil while it grows. Lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album, is essentially quinoa's European cousin, and Viking settlement sites are abundant with its seeds, proving this was a dietary staple rather than merely emergency food during difficult times. This fast-growing annual from the goosefoot family was one of the original superfoods, except it grew like a weed and required zero cultivation. Vikings consumed young shoots and leaves like spinach, harvesting them throughout the growing season for fresh greens. The protein-rich seeds were ground into flour, providing high-quality nutrition that matches modern quinoa. Recent research has demonstrated that lamb's quarters contains more protein than cabbage, more iron than spinach, and more calcium than kale. Archaeological evidence indicates this plant was regularly consumed across Viking territories, with seeds discovered in food waste deposits and cooking areas. The plant is remarkably easy to grow, self-seeding, and producing abundant greens and seeds without any care from gardeners. It's basically a self-sustaining food system that volunteers to feed families year after year. What makes this especially ironic is that lamb's quarters is closely related to quinoa, which we now import from South America at premium prices. Meanwhile, this nutritious native plant grows wild across North America and Europe, dismissed as a common weed by people who don't recognize its value. Good King Henry. Good King Henry, Blightum bonus henricus, was the Vikings' version of a complete meal growing in one plant. This perennial from the goosefoot family was called poor man's asparagus, but it was actually more nutritious than the expensive vegetables we purchase today. The plant provided asparagus-like shoots in spring that were blanched and eaten as a delicacy. Throughout summer, the succulent leaves were used like spinach in soups and stews. Even the flower buds were edible when boiled, giving Viking families multiple harvests from a single plant. Medieval sources describe it as being treasured through the Middle Ages, before virtually disappearing from cultivation by the 20th century. What made Good King Henry perfect for Viking settlements was that it returned every year without replanting and tolerated poor soil conditions. It was the ultimate low-maintenance gardener's dream: plant once and harvest for decades. Recent studies have revealed that Good King Henry contains 3 times more omega-3 fatty acids than iceberg lettuce, and significant amounts of iron and vitamin C. We abandoned this reliable perennial for annual vegetables that need replanting every year, constant care, and perfect growing conditions. It's like canceling a subscription service that delivers exactly what you need and choosing to manually reorder the same thing every month at higher prices. Pignut. Pignut Conopodium majus proves that Vikings knew exactly where to find the hidden treasures in their landscape. This plant from the carrot family conceals sweet, crisp tubers underground that taste like a cross between potatoes and hazelnuts. Place names across Norway still reflect Viking familiarity with jordnut, or earth nuts. The small tubers, only 6 to 8 millimeters across, were eaten raw or boiled like tiny potatoes. 18th century accounts note that Norwegian children were still digging up these sweet tubers as snacks, and during World War I, they were even used as almond substitutes in baking. This tells us that knowledge of pignut persisted in Scandinavian culture long after the Viking Age ended. Archaeological evidence suggests Vikings valued pignut as an emergency food source that grew wild in forest edges and shady areas where other root vegetables wouldn't thrive. The tubers are nutritionally rich in fiber and starch, providing concentrated energy that was especially valuable during lean periods. What made pignut particularly valuable was its ability to thrive in marginal conditions that would challenge other crops. Vikings could harvest these nuts from woodland areas without dedicating prime agricultural land to their cultivation. The plant essentially provided free food from spaces that weren't suitable for other vegetables. Common sorrel. Common sorrel, Rumex acetosa, was the Vikings' solution to citrus before they had access to lemons. The linguistic evidence proves how crucial this plant was to Norse cuisine. The fact that the Sami people borrowed their word for sorrel from Old Norse demonstrates this tart perennial was an essential part of Viking food culture. The lemony leaves were added to soups and sauces exactly like we use lemon juice today, providing the acidic flavoring that made bland winter foods palatable and appetizing. Vikings understood that sour flavors not only improved taste, but also provided essential vitamin C that prevented scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies. Sorrel is among the first greens to emerge in spring spring, arriving precisely when fresh vitamins were desperately needed after long winters of preserved foods. The plant regrows rapidly after cutting, providing a continuous supply of tangy seasoning throughout the growing season. It's essentially a renewable lemon tree that thrives in northern climates where citrus cannot survive. The high vitamin C content made sorrel especially valuable for seafaring communities that needed protection against scurvy during long voyages. Vikings had solved this nutritional challenge centuries before other maritime cultures figured out the connection between fresh vegetables and sailor health. Lovage, Levisticum officinale, was the Vikings' secret weapon for transforming bland food into something extraordinary. This towering perennial herb provided celery-like flavoring that was 10 times more potent than anything available today. The plant was likely brought north by medieval monks and quickly became a staple in Viking-era gardens. Vikings used the leaves and young stems as seasoning in soups, stews, and broths, understanding that the flavor was so concentrated that one sprig could enhance an entire pot of food. Medieval sources describe lovage as both a culinary herb and a digestive aid, recognizing its medicinal properties alongside its flavoring capabilities. This remarkable plant is extremely hardy and multi-purpose, growing over 6 feet tall and living for decades while providing massive amounts of seasoning from very little garden space. The deep roots actually mine nutrients from deep in the soil, improving garden fertility while producing food. It's the rare plant that makes your garden better while feeding your family. Monastery records from the 13th century describe lovage as a remedy for troubles of the stomach and kidney complaints, showing that medieval herbalists understood its medicinal applications. A single lovage plant could provide a family with seasoning and medicine for 20 years or more. Skirret. Finally, we come to skirret, Sium cicerum, the plant that proves Vikings mastered patience far better than any contemporary gardener. Skirret functioned as the Viking equivalent of a long-term investment account, except instead of accumulating wealth, it produced sweet, fibrous roots that tasted superior to anything available at today's markets. Vikings knew this plant as krumbot or gira, and it represented the ultimate set-it-and-forget-it crop. While modern gardeners coddle their vegetables with constant watering, perfect soil conditions, and climate-controlled environments, skirret simply worked its magic underground without complaints. You planted it once, and these sweet white roots multiplied year after year without requiring any help from you. But here's what made skirret truly remarkable: the taste. These slender white roots were naturally sweeter than carrots or parsnips, so delicious that medieval nobility demanded them in their royal gardens. Archaeological evidence shows that while direct Viking-era discoveries are limited, early medieval records confirm this plant was treasured throughout northern Europe. The roots contained abundant starch and natural sugars, featuring feathery green foliage and extensive taproots that could dig deep into soil for nutrients. Vikings ate skirret both raw and cooked, often sweetening it with honey to create what amounted to medieval candy. The roots could be boiled, roasted, or made into sweet treats that made harsh winter meals bearable. What made it especially valuable was its reliability during brutal Nordic winters, when other crops failed completely. By the 18th century, we had abandoned this cold, hardy champion for potatoes, which required perfect conditions and constant attention. It's like trading a dependable pickup truck that starts every morning for a luxury car that breaks down every winter. Skirret was labor-intensive to harvest and produced smaller yields than modern crops, but it offered something far more precious: guaranteed food security in an unpredictable climate. Vikings understood that dependability beat convenience, a lesson we've forgotten in our pursuit of high-yield, high-maintenance vegetables. These 17 lost vegetables aren't just historical curiosities. They're solutions to every problem plaguing modern agriculture. Climate change, soil depletion, pesticide resistance, and food insecurity could all be addressed by rediscovering these hardy survivors that sustained history's most successful explorers. While we struggle with pampered crops that need perfect conditions, Vikings had figured out food security using plants that thrived on neglect and improved with age. The seeds are still available through heritage suppliers, waiting for us to remember that sometimes the old ways weren't just different, they were better.